Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a single mom raising my 11-year-old son Tyler in suburban Denver. I work double shifts as a nurse just to keep us afloat, but I'd do anything to see that kid smile. What I never expected was for my own family to be the ones who'd shatter his world on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his year. It was Tyler's 11th birthday party, and I had spent 3 entire days crafting his dream cake. We're talking about a 3-tier superhero masterpiece with hand-molded fondant figures of every Avenger, complete with LED lights inside to make Iron Man's arc reactor actually glow. Tyler had been sketching ideas for this cake since January, and I was determined to make every detail perfect. As a single mom, I couldn't afford the fancy party venue or the professional entertainer, but I could pour my heart into that cake. The morning of the party, Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement. He'd been wearing his favorite superhero cape, the one his dad gave him before the cancer took him 2 years ago, and he kept running into the kitchen every 5 minutes to stare at his cake. "Mom, is it really mine? Like, really, really mine?" he kept asking, his eyes wide with wonder. That cake represented everything I wanted to give him but couldn't afford. Magic, joy, the feeling that he was the most important person in the world. I'd invited about 15 kids from his class, plus our small family. My dad was coming, along with my younger sister Jessica. I'll be honest, I was already stressed about Jessica showing up. At 28, she still acted like the world revolved around her, and she had this habit of turning every family gathering into the Jessica show. But Tyler adored his Aunt Jessica, and I wasn't going to ruin his birthday over my anxieties. The party started at 2 p.m. Kids were running around our tiny backyard, playing superhero tag and having water balloon fights. Tyler was in his element, directing elaborate rescue missions and making sure every kid got to be the hero at least once. I was running around like crazy, refilling juice boxes, mediating disputes over the last pizza slice, and constantly checking on that precious cake through the kitchen window. Jessica showed up an hour late, which was typical. She breezed through the back gate like she owned the place, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying what looked like a hastily grabbed gift bag from the dollar store. "Sorry I'm late, everyone. Traffic was absolutely insane," she announced, though I'd talked to her that morning and she'd still been in bed at noon. Tyler ran up to her immediately, cape flying behind him. "Aunt Jessica, you made it! Do you want to see my cake? Mom made it herself and it lights up and everything." His excitement was infectious, and for a moment, I felt that familiar flutter of hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time Jessica would just let Tyler have his day. "Oh, honey, I can't wait to see it," Jessica said, but I caught her eye roll when she thought Tyler wasn't looking. She immediately gravitated toward my dad, who was manning the grill and looking overwhelmed by the chaos of 11-year-olds. I watched her whisper something in his ear that made him shake his head and smile indulgently. That smile, the one that meant Jessica was already working her magic, positioning herself as the fun, carefree daughter, while I was the uptight single mom who took everything too seriously. The party was actually going well until it was time for the cake. I'd planned this moment perfectly. All the kids gathered around our picnic table, Tyler at the head with his superhero cape flowing, candles flickering against the golden afternoon light. I carried that magnificent cake out like I was presenting the crown jewels, and the collective gasp from the kids was everything I'd hoped for. "Oh my God, Tyler, this is incredible!" his best friend Marcus shouted. "Your mom is like a cake wizard." Tyler's face was pure radiance. He looked at me with such pride and love that I felt tears prick my eyes. "Mom made this just for me," he announced to everyone. "She worked on it for 3 whole days because she loves me." The kids were taking pictures with their phones, and Tyler was explaining every detail of the cake design when Jessica decided she needed to be the center of attention. "Well, well, well," she said, moving closer to the table with that particular smile that always made my stomach clench. "This is quite the production, isn't it? Tyler, sweetie, you know what we need to do with a cake this fancy?" I should have seen it coming. I should have recognized the look in her eyes, the same one she'd had when she accidentally spilled red wine on my wedding dress, or when she told everyone at Mom's funeral that I was handling grief inappropriately by crying too much. But I was so focused on Tyler's happiness that I missed all the warning signs. "What do you mean, Aunt Jessica?" Tyler asked innocently, still glowing with birthday joy. "We need to make sure you really get to experience it," Jessica said, and before anyone could react, she grabbed Tyler by the shoulders and shoved his face directly into the center of that beautiful cake. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's face was completely buried in 3 layers of buttercream and fondant, and when he finally pulled back, I could see the shock and humiliation in his eyes. But worse than that, much worse, was the angry red mark across his forehead where one of the LED lights had burned him. "Jessica!" I screamed, rushing to Tyler's side. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Tyler was crying now, not just from embarrassment but from the actual pain. The LED light had been hot, and it had left a clear burn mark across his forehead. The other kids had gone completely silent, some of them starting to cry themselves because they'd never seen anything like this happen at a birthday party. "Oh my God, Tyler, are you okay? Let me see," I said, trying to gently clean the cake from his face while examining the burn. It wasn't severe, but it was definitely going to leave a mark for days. My beautiful, sensitive boy was sobbing, his superhero cape now stained with cake and his confidence completely shattered. "It was just a joke!" Jessica immediately started defending herself, her voice taking on that tone I knew so well, the one that somehow made me feel like I was the problem. "Kids need to toughen up. It's just cake, Madison. You're acting like I set him on fire or something." But Tyler wasn't just crying about the physical pain. I could see it in his eyes, the deep hurt of having someone he trusted humiliate him in front of all his friends on the most important day of his year. This wasn't just about cake. This was about trust, about safety, about the basic right to feel special on your birthday. "Just cake?" I was shaking with rage now. "Jessica, he's burned! Look at his forehead! And you destroyed 3 days of work, but more importantly, you destroyed his birthday." The other parents were starting to arrive for pickup, and I could see them taking in the scene. Tyler covered in cake and tears, me holding him protectively, Jessica standing there with her arms crossed like she was the victim. One by one, parents started quietly collecting their children and leaving, murmuring polite excuses, but clearly uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed. "Madison, calm down," my dad finally spoke up, but instead of concern for Tyler, his voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment in me. "Accidents happen. Jessica didn't mean for him to get hurt." "Accident?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, she deliberately grabbed him and shoved his face into the cake. How is that an accident?" "You always overreact, Madison," Jessica chimed in, and I could see her settling into her role as the reasonable one. "Tyler's fine. Kids are resilient. Maybe if you didn't baby him so much, he wouldn't be so sensitive about everything." And there it was, the same pattern that had played out our entire lives. Jessica would do something cruel or thoughtless, and somehow I would end up being the villain for having feelings about it. Dad would step in as the peacekeeper, which really meant pressuring me to accept Jessica's behavior to avoid conflict. "Tyler is not being sensitive," I said firmly, still holding my son who was trying to stop crying but couldn't quite manage it. "He's responding normally to being humiliated and physically hurt by someone he trusted." "Physical hurt?" Jessica laughed, and that laugh was like a knife in my chest. "Madison, you're being completely dramatic. It's barely red. He'll be fine by tomorrow." But Tyler wouldn't be fine tomorrow. I could already see the change in him. The way he was pulling away from everyone. The way his shoulders had hunched in on themselves. This wasn't just about a ruined birthday party. This was about a little boy learning that the adults in his life couldn't be trusted to protect him, even from each other. "Come on, Tyler," I said softly. "Let's go inside and get you cleaned up." As I led Tyler toward the house, I heard Jessica say to Dad, "I don't know why she has to make everything so dramatic. It was supposed to be fun." And Dad's response made my blood run cold. "You know how Madison gets. She's been high-strung since her husband died. High-strung, because wanting your child to be safe and respected at his own birthday party was somehow an overreaction. because protecting your son from humiliation was being dramatic. I felt something shift inside me in that moment, a recognition that this pattern had to stop, that I couldn't keep sacrificing Tyler's well-being for family peace. The next morning, Tyler woke up and the first thing he did was carefully fold his superhero cape and put it in the bottom of his closet. When I asked him why, he said quietly, "Superheroes don't cry, Mom." And I cried yesterday. I cried in front of everyone. My heart broke watching him try to make sense of what had happened. At 11 years old, he was already learning to internalize the idea that his feelings were wrong, that being hurt by someone's cruelty was somehow his fault. I realized that this moment was going to define something for him. Either he was going to learn that adults would fail to protect him, or he was going to learn that some adults would fight for him no matter what. That's when my phone rang and I saw Grandma Eleanor's name on the screen. Eleanor was my dad's mother, a woman who had raised 5 children as a single mom in the 1960s and 70s after leaving an abusive marriage. At 76, she was still sharp as a tack and tough as nails, but she'd always been gentle with Tyler. She called him her little warrior and never missed an opportunity to tell him how proud she was of him. "Madison, honey." Her voice came through the phone with that familiar warmth, but there was something else underneath it. Something steel-cold that I'd only heard a few times in my life. "I heard what happened at Tyler's party yesterday." "Grandma, is Tyler okay? Really okay?" I looked over at my son, who was sitting at the kitchen table picking at his cereal, the angry red mark still visible across his forehead. "He's hurt, Grandma, not just physically. Jessica really did a number on him." There was a long pause, and when Eleanor spoke again, her voice was different, harder than I'd ever heard it. "Madison, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to handle this situation, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "What do you mean, handle it?" "Some lessons can only be taught one way, honey, and it's time your sister learned what happens when you hurt my great-grandson." The way she said it sent chills down my spine. This wasn't the gentle grandmother who baked cookies and told bedtime stories. This was the woman who had survived domestic violence, who had built a successful business from nothing, who had never backed down from a fight when it mattered. "Grandma, what are you planning?" "You just take care of Tyler today. Make sure he knows that what happened to him was wrong and that there are people in this family who will always protect him. I'll handle your father and Jessica." After she hung up, I spent the day trying to help Tyler process what had happened. We talked about how sometimes people do hurtful things when they're jealous or want attention, and how that doesn't make it okay or his fault. I showed him pictures of his beautiful cake before it was destroyed, and we talked about how proud I was of his kindness to his friends during the party. But I could see that something fundamental had shifted in Tyler. The easy trust was gone, replaced by a wariness that no 11-year-old should have to carry. He kept touching the burn mark on his forehead and asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Why did Aunt Jessica want to hurt me? Did I do something wrong? Are you going to make me see her again? That evening, as I was tucking Tyler into bed, he looked up at me with those serious eyes that sometimes made him seem much older than his years. "Mom, why doesn't Grandpa think what Aunt Jessica did was wrong?" It was a question that cut straight to the heart of everything, the family dynamics that had shaped my entire life, the pattern of enabling and excuse-making that had allowed Jessica to hurt people without consequences for nearly 3 decades. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the adults who are supposed to protect you choose peace over justice, comfort over truth? "Sometimes adults make mistakes too, baby," I said carefully. "Sometimes they're so used to making excuses for someone that they forget to think about who's getting hurt." "Huh, but you don't make excuses for people who hurt me, right, Mom?" The trust in his voice was absolute, and I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders. "No, Tyler, I will never make excuses for anyone who hurts you. Ever." As I turned off his light and closed his door, I thought about Eleanor's phone call and wondered what she was planning. I'd seen her angry before, when a contractor tried to cheat her, when a store clerk was rude to Tyler, when politicians on TV said things she disagreed with. But this was different. This was the quiet, determined anger of a woman who had spent her entire life learning how to fight for what mattered. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and protecting your child? Because tomorrow, I was about to learn that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones willing to shatter that peace completely. The next morning, I woke up with a sick feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the leftover birthday cake sitting untouched in my refrigerator. Tyler was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his cereal, but I noticed he'd positioned himself so the burn mark on his forehead was turned away from me. He was trying to protect me from seeing his pain, and that broke my heart all over again. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm okay, Mom," he said quietly, but I could see the way he unconsciously touched the red mark. "It doesn't hurt as much today." But I knew this wasn't just about physical pain anymore. I'd been a pediatric nurse long enough to recognize trauma responses in children, and Tyler was showing all the signs: the withdrawn behavior, the way he kept looking toward the door like he was expecting another attack, the careful way he was monitoring my emotions to make sure I wasn't upset. I decided I needed to document everything properly. As a healthcare professional, I knew the importance of evidence, especially when dealing with family members who had a history of gaslighting. I took careful photos of Tyler's forehead from multiple angles, making sure the timestamp was visible. The burn was clearly defined, a perfect rectangular mark where the LED light had pressed against his skin. While Tyler was getting dressed for school, I started going through my phone from yesterday. I'd been so focused on hosting the party that I hadn't realized my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had been taking photos from her yard next door. When I texted her asking if she'd captured anything from the party, her response made my blood run cold. "Madison, I saw what happened. I actually got it on my security camera because it faces your backyard. Do you want me to send you the footage?" 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my living room watching clear video evidence of Jessica deliberately grabbing Tyler and shoving his face into the cake. There was no way to interpret it as an accident or a joke gone wrong. You could see Jessica looking around to make sure she had an audience before she grabbed Tyler. You could see the calculated way she positioned herself. And you could see Tyler's immediate reaction. Not laughter or surprise, but genuine shock and pain. But what made me feel physically sick was what the camera had captured that I'd missed in the chaos. After Tyler pulled his face out of the cake while I was rushing to help him, Jessica had actually smiled and taken a selfie with the destroyed cake in the background. She'd documented Tyler's humiliation for her own entertainment. That's when I remembered her social media. With shaking hands, I pulled up Jessica's Instagram account, and what I found there made me see red. She'd posted 3 stories from yesterday that I'd somehow missed in all the chaos. The first was a boomerang video of Tyler's beautiful cake with the caption, "Madison went way overboard as usual, doc or extra mom." The second was a photo she'd taken during the cake incident with the caption, "YOLO, someone needed to lighten up this party. Chapta birthday fun, chapta no regrets." The third was a group photo of her and Dad, taken after I'd gone inside with Tyler, both of them smiling while you could still see cake debris on the table behind them. The caption read, "Family drama level, Madison. At least Dad and I know how to have fun. Family time, soccer drama free." I screenshot everything before she could delete it, my hands shaking with rage. She wasn't just unrepentant. She was actively mocking Tyler's pain and my overreaction to a public audience. She'd turned my son's worst birthday into content for her social media feed. My phone buzzed with a text from our family group chat. Dad had written, "Hope everyone can move past yesterday's incident. Jessica feels terrible and didn't mean for Tyler to get hurt. Maybe we can all get together this weekend for a do-over celebration?" Jessica's response came immediately. "I'd love to make it up to Tyler. Maybe we can get him a store-bought cake this time so it's not such a big deal if something happens to it." I stared at that message for a full minute before the implications hit me. She was suggesting that the problem wasn't her behavior. It was that I'd cared too much about the cake I'd made. She was already rewriting the narrative to make me the unreasonable one for being upset that she'd destroyed something I'd worked on for days. But Dad's response was what really showed me how deep this problem went. "Good idea, Jess. Madison, maybe something simpler would be less stressful for everyone." less stressful for everyone, as if the stress had come from my expectations rather than from Jessica assaulting my child at his own birthday party. I was still processing this when Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. She was holding a printed copy of the security footage and looked genuinely concerned. "Madison, I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw yesterday," she said. "I have 3 grandchildren of my own, and if someone did that to any of them—" She shook her head. "That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a joke. That was deliberate cruelty." "I know," I said, accepting the printed photos. "But my family is acting like I'm overreacting. Honey, I've been watching families in this neighborhood for 15 years. I've seen parents overreact to every scraped knee and birthday party conflict. This isn't that. This is a grown woman deliberately hurting a child and your father defending her for it." Mrs. Chen's expression was serious. "I want you to know that if you need a witness, if this goes anywhere official, I'll testify to what I saw." After she left, I sat in my living room staring at all the evidence I'd gathered. Photos of Tyler's burn, video footage of the incident, screenshots of Jessica's social media posts mocking the situation, and text messages showing the family's determination to minimize what had happened. It was overwhelming to see it all laid out like that, to realize how calculated Jessica's cruelty had been, and how systematic the family's enabling was. That's when my phone rang and I saw a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Madison?" The voice was warm but unfamiliar. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Sarah Martinez. My daughter Emma was at Tyler's party yesterday. I wanted to check on Tyler and also, well, I wanted you to know what Emma told me about your sister." My heart started racing. What did she say?" "Emma said that before the cake incident, your sister was asking the kids questions about Tyler. Things like whether he cried a lot, whether he was a mama's boy, whether he thought he was special because of his fancy cake." Emma felt uncomfortable with the questions, but she's only 11 and didn't know how to respond. The calculated nature of Jessica's attack was becoming clearer. She hadn't just spontaneously decided to humiliate Tyler, she'd been setting it up, gathering intelligence about his vulnerabilities from his own friends. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Emma said your sister smelled like alcohol when she arrived. Not drunk, but like she'd been drinking before she came to a children's party." After Sarah hung up, I felt like I was seeing Jessica clearly for the first time. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or attention-seeking behavior. This was someone who had deliberately targeted a child, planned his humiliation, and then celebrated the results. And she'd done it while under the influence at a children's birthday party. I spent the rest of the morning researching childhood trauma and emotional abuse. What I learned made me feel sick. Children who experience deliberate humiliation from trusted family members often develop long-term issues with self-worth, trust, and emotional regulation. They're more likely to accept abusive treatment in future relationships because they learn early that love and cruelty can coexist. I thought about Tyler carefully folding his superhero cape and putting it away, telling me that superheroes don't cry. I thought about how he'd positioned himself at breakfast to hide his burn mark from me. I thought about his question, "Why did Aunt Jessica want to hurt me?" That's when I realized this wasn't just about one incident. This was about breaking a generational cycle. I'd grown up accepting Jessica's cruelty as just how she was, learning to minimize my own feelings to keep peace in the family. I'd been conditioned to believe that my hurt was less important than Jessica's comfort, that speaking up about mistreatment was being dramatic. But I would not let Tyler learn those same lessons. I would not let him grow up believing that people who claim to love you have the right to humiliate you, or that protecting yourself from abuse is somehow wrong. My phone buzzed with another text from the family group chat. This time it was Dad. "Madison, Jessica is really upset about yesterday. She's been crying all morning because she feels so bad. Maybe you could call her and talk this through." The audacity was breathtaking. Jessica was upset? She was crying? What about Tyler, who couldn't even look at his own birthday cake without remembering being humiliated in front of all his friends? I was about to respond when my phone rang again. This time, it was Grandma Eleanor. "Madison, honey, how's Tyler today?" "He's struggling, Grandma. He's trying to be brave, but I can see how much this affected him." "And your father? Has he reached out to check on Tyler?" He wants me to call Jessica because she's upset about yesterday. The silence on the other end of the line was so long I thought we'd been disconnected. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. Madison, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to visit your father and Jessica today. I'm going to explain some things to them about family, about protecting children, and about consequences. I need you to keep Tyler with you today and don't answer any calls from your father or Jessica until you hear from me. Grandma, what are you planning to do? I'm going to teach them a lesson they should have learned a long time ago. Some people only understand one kind of language, and I speak that language fluently. Are you going to be okay? I mean, Dad can be really stubborn when he thinks he's right. Eleanor's laugh was sharp and humorless. Honey, your father learned everything he knows about being stubborn from me, but he seems to have forgotten where he came from. It's time to remind him. That afternoon, I picked Tyler up from school early and took him to the park. We sat on a bench watching other kids play, and I tried to explain what was happening in terms he could understand. Tyler, you know how sometimes when someone does something wrong, they need to have a consequence so they learn not to do it again? He nodded, still touching his forehead absently. Well, Grandma Eleanor thinks that Aunt Jessica and Grandpa need to learn some consequences for what happened yesterday. She's going to talk to them today. Is Grandma going to be okay? Grandpa gets really loud when he's mad. The fact that my 11-year-old was worried about his great-grandmother's safety when confronting his grandfather told me everything I needed to know about the family dynamics Tyler had been observing. Grandma Eleanor is stronger than you know, baby. She's been protecting people she loves for a very long time. We spent the afternoon at the park, and for the first time since his birthday, I saw Tyler really smile. We were on our way home when Eleanor called. It's done, she said simply. What happened? I'll tell you everything when I see you, but Madison, I need you to know, this stops now. Tyler will never be hurt by Jessica again, and your father will never make excuses for her again. I've made sure of that. How can you be sure? Because I reminded them both what happens when someone messes with my family, and I brought some visual aids to help them remember. That evening, as I was making dinner, Dad called. His voice was shaky in a way I'd never heard before. Madison, we need to talk. About yesterday, about Jessica, about everything. What did Grandma say to you? She helped me understand some things I'd been refusing to see, about Jessica's behavior over the years, about how I've been enabling her, about what that's done to you and now to Tyler. I could hear something broken in his voice, something that sounded like genuine remorse for the first time in years. Dad, Tyler was hurt, really hurt, and not just physically. I know. God, Madison, I know. Your grandmother showed me things today that made me realize what I've been doing, what I've been allowing. What kind of things? Evidence, photos, videos, social media posts. She laid it all out like a prosecutor building a case, and I couldn't deny it anymore. Jessica planned what she did to Tyler. She celebrated it, and his voice broke. I made excuses for her like I always do. Where's Jessica now? She's gone to stay with her friend in Phoenix for a while. Grandma convinced her that some distance would be good for everyone. Convinced her. I had a feeling there was a lot more to that story. Dad, I need you to understand something. Tyler asked me if I would ever make excuses for people who hurt him, and I promised him I wouldn't. That includes family. I understand. And Madison, I owe you an apology. Not just for yesterday, but for years of making you feel like your feelings didn't matter, like protecting yourself, and Tyler was being dramatic. 2 days later, Eleanor came to visit. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd completed a difficult but necessary task. Tyler ran to hug her immediately, and I watched her face soften as she held him. "How's my little warrior doing?" she asked, gently touching the fading mark on his forehead. "Better, Grandma. Mom says you talked to Grandpa and Aunt Jessica." "I did indeed. And do you know what I told them?" Tyler shook his head. "I told them that in this family, we protect each other, especially the youngest ones, and anyone who hurts my great-grandson will have to answer to me." "What did you bring to show them?" I asked, remembering her comment about visual aids. Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. Well, I brought all the evidence you'd gathered, the photos, the videos, the social media posts, but I also brought something to help them understand how seriously I take protecting you and Tyler. What was it? My old baseball bat, the one I kept by my bed when I was raising 5 kids alone and had to deal with your grandfather's drinking buddies who thought they could intimidate a single mother. I stared at her. You brought a baseball bat to Dad's house? I didn't threaten anyone, honey. I just set it on the coffee table while we talked and explained that this was how we handled bullies in my day. I told them that I'd spent my whole life learning how to protect the people I love, and I wasn't too old to remember those lessons. What did Dad say? Your father got very quiet when he saw that bat and remembered some stories from his childhood. He started thinking about all the times I'd protected him and his siblings from people who wanted to hurt them. He realized he'd failed to protect Tyler the same way. And Jessica? Eleanor's expression hardened. Jessica tried her usual tricks, crying, deflecting, making herself the victim, but I laid out every piece of evidence and asked her to explain each one. When she couldn't, when she realized I wasn't going to be manipulated or gaslit, she finally understood that her behavior has consequences. Is she really going to stay away? She's going to get some help first. I made it very clear that she's not welcome around Tyler until she can prove she's changed. And your father understands that if he ever makes excuses for someone hurting Tyler again, he'll be dealing with me. That weekend, Dad came over to see Tyler. He brought a new superhero cape, one that was exactly like Tyler's original but made from flame-resistant material. When he gave it to Tyler, he got down on his knees to look him in the eye. Tyler, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Grandpa was wrong to say that what Aunt Jessica did was okay. She hurt you, and that was never okay. I should have protected you instead of making excuses for her. Tyler considered this seriously. Are you going to protect me now, Grandpa? Yes, I promise. And if anyone ever hurts you again, even family, you tell me and I'll make sure it stops. Even Aunt Jessica? Especially Aunt Jessica. That night, Tyler put on his new cape and wore it to dinner. As we sat around the table, me, Tyler, Dad, and Eleanor, Tyler looked up and asked, Grandma, why did you bring a baseball bat to Grandpa's house? Eleanor smiled and ruffled his hair. Because sometimes, little warrior, people need to remember what it feels like to be protected, and sometimes they need to remember what happens when they mess with people we love. Are you going to teach me how to use a baseball bat? Someday, if your mom says it's okay. But for now, just remember that you have people in your family who will always fight for you. Real superheroes protect each other, and that's exactly what we're going to do. As I tucked Tyler into bed that night, he looked up at me with those serious eyes. Mom, I think I understand now why Aunt Jessica hurt me. Why do you think she did it? Because nobody ever taught her what happens when you hurt people. But Grandma Eleanor taught her, didn't she? Yes, baby. Grandma taught her. And now she knows that if she hurts me again, Grandma will come back with her baseball bat? I smiled, thinking about Eleanor's determination to protect her family, about the way she'd faced down decades of enabling behavior with nothing but evidence and a baseball bat as a symbol of her resolve. Now she knows that this family protects each other, no matter what. Tyler nodded contentedly and closed his eyes. For the first time since his birthday, he looked peaceful. And for the first time in years, I felt like my son was truly safe in his own family. Have you ever had someone in your life who made you feel protected, who was willing to fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself? Comment below and share your Eleanor story, because every family needs someone willing to pick up a baseball bat, literally or figuratively, when the people they love are in danger.